So the first poem is No Exit. No exit. Durban transport, the Tuzuma ENF bus. And all of a sudden, the singing of hymns, flipping out of Bibles, palms beating on the holy book. The congregation got on from the bus stop, opposite Musgrave Mall. Steep, their frail legs, steep strides up steps, arms pulling their bodies up, the driver handing back tickets. They began just as we passed over Port City, the motion of circles, dabs along corners of her forehead, gentle strokes along the temples, our end foreshadowed by a handkerchief. After catching a breath, discerning about the last days, life flamed in the throat from the burn of the word, a scorching in the scraping of the lungs, hellfire and brimstone, echoes of Sartre in the smoke, like mirrors, the chorus of the elderly devoted on the end of every word, the coming of the flood, the rest of us left to drown in holy oxygen. These were holy words. Safa Sepela Bazalwane, disarming, respect for the elderly. The legs made no attempt to kick out of emergency class. A collective paralysis. Blindly we followed into the final stages of our grief. And as we turned towards the window to measure how far we had come, how much more we could take, we were only in Newlands West. It would be a whole 2 stops before we even reached Kwamashu. Okay. And so the next poem I'll be reading is a poem called Madala. Okay. Dala Madala, whiskey breath, cheering on, watching. Blow by blow, rows of Soweto, out and blooming in 6 directions of boxing. Burnout, Hostik Mabuza, Don Laga Supernova tapping shoes of Madala. Bloma brown blazer, vintage Cressida, life is Goro Goro behind the steering wheel and cruising. Okay. So the next poem I'll read you is a poem called Slow Jam Tawamashu. Okay. Even the ballads of Vendros couldn't make it better. At times I feel like life in Mashu moves so slowly, almost as if the people have become the music they listen to. Blasting the sound system, even a braai, but not much washing of cars. Gamla, I know you're scared. You should ask if we're scared too. And then we're gonna read Mbongeni. There is heat, then there is sun mercilessly beating skin. But this does not compare to the smell of blood in the air. Oh Mbongeni, your song Amandia, reminiscent of the underlying blood that boiled, the tension that never left. Some still feel it as a high cost of living in convenience shops around Durban. Okay. And then we're gonna go to Cassette, famous poem, right at the back of the blurb. Cassette. I could never bring myself to ask the artist and title of the cassette tape that my uncle was killed for. On the streets of Gomashu F, the murderer still works. His footsteps block out our moments of silence. Okay? And then the final poem I'll read is Durban. Okay. This page to it. All right. Durban. Eyes, sight see trees, the land, same eyes, deeming our beauty primitive. Hands, bricks, the layers, fields, whole fields, institutionalized. The bodies swallowed by the water, flow and its purpose, the ocean with all the commotion. My fear is we are yet to listen to the waves before waves relent and calmness falling over the sea. Mouth of ocean and swallowed. Within depths of the belly, will we find Chief Bambata? Goes after him, our hands, lands on our palms, thrown to labor. And crashing sound of Gandhi's voice like waves over Bambata's bones. And so the story goes. An ocean, won't you tell me of bones, salt content, and the bodies that may seem familiar to you? And so the story goes. On water in all directions, the ocean and its purpose. Water diluting blood, sea salts of the ocean. body swallowed by the sea, and for a long time, the wait until the wave relents, and when it does, now to move as the water does. Of all the bodies lost to the mouth of ocean, some will still listen to in hope, may stillness not be confused with silence. A new life form in the closure, and may the sound of still, calm, and tranquil be received with the heart warm at the ocean. Thank you.
You know, I think if we were maybe somewhere in Durban, like in Adams or Ike's or somewhere else, there'd be a lot of people clapping right now. So we just have to, yeah, just have to do it with one pair of hands. But thanks, Sihle. It's I'm always struck whenever I hear the poets that I publish read. The poems are almost kind of like reborn again, you know, because there's a way that the poem exists as something that you and I edit together and think about together, and but then there's the poem once it's done, and then when the poem is done, it has almost sort of a different life, almost. And so I'm just wondering how that feels for you, you know, now that you've got your second collection out or your second work. You know, what do these poems feel like? Before we get into speaking more deeply about them and about your own poetic practice.
All right. Well, I'd have to say it's not an easy process to go about like getting it to write the way you want it to be. And yeah, we worked a lot, me and you, on it, editing it to get it like right to where it is now. So it's a long process, but it's a rewarding one as well. I think my encouragement to writers is that they mustn't give up on themselves. You need to bet on yourself. And I think I've bet on myself like quite a bit. So for me, just putting the poems together, it's a process that I think takes a lot of yeah, like concentration, focus, and also a bit of intuition as well. I like to read my poems out aloud when I'm composing them, so I guess the music comes into play there. When I read it out, like now, also takes me back to when I was writing it. Like I'm literally at my desk, putting them down as I was reading them. So that was a great experience as well.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm also reading them out, so there's that. But it's a great thing to see all your hard work come to fruition, and yeah, I think we should all strive to get to this place.
A lot of people won't know this, but I mean, before we came on to chat about this, there's this little book here, which came out 6 years ago. Almost to the week. 6 weeks. 6 years and 2 weeks ago. And what this is, if some of you don't know, is the first and only issue of uHlanga when it was a magazine. And the launch of this happened on stage at Poetry Africa, which is, if you don't know, one of the three main literary festivals that happens in Durban every year. And this year at Poetry Africa, I put this magazine together and invited a few of the contributors to come, and this is when I actually met Sihle. And it's funny because, you know, looking back at these poems, and I don't know what I was trying to do or what we were trying to do, but I think it was just about trying to create a space predominantly for people from KwaZulu-Natal, and a space for us in the literature of South and Southern Africa and sort of Africa as a whole. And this didn't work out for reasons that I'll go into at some other time. But what's amazing is that Sihle is now the 6th author or writer who was published in this book that uHlanga has now brought out a standalone book for. So this is something that's actually worked out really well. And I want to talk about sort of our connection with Durban, with eThekwini, with this place that since the pandemic hit, I mean, for myself, I've really been yearning to go home, and it's been difficult not being able to. And like myself, Sihle, you've lived in some different places. I think when we first met, you were maybe living in Cape Town, and you lived in Bloemfontein for a while, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering why, why you keep on sort of coming back to Durban. I know it's home. It's where it's easiest to be, but this book Rumblin has so much to do with Durban and so much to do with being in Durban. And I just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say it worked out pretty well to be here 6 years later.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty chuffed about that. I know me and Musa exchange messages every now and then, so it's good to also be on the same publishing press as him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, for me, my family is based in Durban now. And it's where I connect with. I don't like to go too much to like swim out in the beach. I'm more on the sand, but just to be near the ocean is one thing I love to be. Hence the poem Durban as well. And my connection with people, I think Durban people just are more honest with me, whereas I think everywhere else they have their own sort of little things that I don't like. But not to say that they're bad, but I think I can trust people from home a lot more. But yeah, it's just home is there. My twin brother and I sort of grew up, looking at everything with eyes of wonder. We saw buildings get built, um, change, shop owners lose business, shops closing. It was just to watch all of that from the spot that you began the journey of life in to now is just, for me, it might seem something small, but it's an experience.
I mean, the city's changed so much, and I wonder how it's been for you. How has the experience been? I suppose over the years, growing up in KwaMashu and having your family there, and sort of how also that develops, because KwaMashu is also really deeply present in these poems. And it's somewhere that I used to go quite a lot as a kid. And we can talk about it some other time. But it's, the dynamism of the place is, I wonder if you'd like to speak about, Mashu in particular.
All right. Maybe I'll backtrack a bit to speak to like the multicultural sort of aspect of Durban as well. And in the interview we did with Gatek for African Dialogue, we spoke about how I always speak about the bus system, the Durban transport system. I think that's a great way to sort of show the multicultural aspect of Durban. I'm a big fan of the bus as opposed to taxis. So.
Yeah.
Old man Sihle rides the bus. Maybe I'll backtrack a bit to speak to like the multicultural sort of aspect of Durban as well. And very multicultural. So when I was in KwaMashu growing up, sort of got to live with also different kinds of people as well. They split KwaMashu off into sections. I'm in F section, hence the title of my first poem from my first collection, KwaMashu F section bus stop.
Yeah.
So KwaMashu F section is a very artsy space. I'm friends with the djembe drummer as well as a contemporary art dancer from F section. And then of course A and B section is where all sort of the bad things happen. Most of the news reports about sort of incidents happen in A and B section. More we call them izimpohlo, which translates to bachelors. So they're there to work. Because KwaMashu was originally a sugarcane plantation as well. So I think there's still very pastoral areas as well. That's your KwaMashu A and B. And yeah, the dynamic is different as you go through each section. We have a C section, D section, E, and then yeah, it skips out some letters. It's a very similar system in Umlazi as well that they use regards to
Yeah, I was
learning.
about to say. Like when I did some reporting for the Mercury, I used to get really lost in Umlazi.
It's the biggest township, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
In Durban. But I think, yeah, when you grow up in KwaMashu, it's predominantly black, so you learn Zulu, immerse yourself in black culture. And yeah, interestingly enough, you get this show of masculinity as well. I would say toxic masculinity as well. A film like Cassette speaks about that in terms of like these role models that we were supposed to look up to, but essentially they were gangsters. They were in their gold chains, four-star shoes, driving BMWs, which is a similar sort of role model notion that you get when you go to Soweto, you go to Tanzania as well. And it's interesting how there's so many similarities across various townships around the country. And so when I was growing up, that's sort of what we're supposedly supposed to become eventually, supposed breadwinners, through different means.
Classicist.
So again,
you became a classicist.
oddly enough, I became a classicist. My thesis was on Alexander the Great, and so it's very different to my background, having come from a place that would speak more about Shaka Zulu than Alexander the Great. So I thought that was a little bit interesting as well. But there's so many similarities as well between the two.
Yeah.
As conquerors of various empires, civilizations. Shaka deal with an iron fist, whereas Alexander is arguable that he was assimilating cultures, marrying into various sort of cultures as well. So yeah.
What drew you to the classics, and how do the classics still, if in any way? I mean, the classics do come up in these poems. So talking about like Aesop and the fables and a bunch of other things. But last night we had a launch for some new translations of Catullus. And there was someone present there who was talking about Catullus being translated into Shona. And when they were growing up, it was kind of this really interesting way to show that, as you say, the classical world and our, what we call the modern world, share so many similarities in the dynamics and the social dynamics and the multiculturalism. And it's often, I like to think of the classics as an affirmation that people are the same, right? Kind of just do the same shit over and over.
I hear you. I'd say that there's so many similarities in history repeating itself in the classics and now you wouldn't believe it. Um, for instance, a very unpopular opinion now, maybe popular opinion, is the whole idea of the deification of Mandela. Nelson Mandela, his name is on, well, Nelson Mandela Bay, which is Bay, Port Elizabeth, sorry. And then you have him on the money, on the currency. And these were the same sort of thing that they were doing with Alexander the Great as well.
Right.
He was deified to his followers, to his subjects. Alexandria, even in Egypt, is a parallel you make with Nelson Mandela Bay. So these are sort of the comparisons that I'm making with regards to modern life and life in antiquity. And even our very parliamentary system finds its roots in antiquity, in classical civilization. Even in South Africa, we have Roman Dutch law. And yeah, you know what the Romans did with regards to the way civilization is shaped today. Our days of the weeks have a Roman influence in them as well. So I'd say the classics is, as much as people would overlook it, that it's quite a big part in our modern society in terms of our foundational pillar. I think we're just moving and metamorphosizing around that, but I think there's a lot more to offer in the classics than people would think. But it's not a really a respected sort of field as much as I would hope it would be.
I mean, I am only now just coming onto the classics and the classical world. I think it's difficult sometimes. You know, our modern world, these things are very foundational, but we tend to I mean I was a and it's something I'm trying to correct. So the classics and music.
Yes.
Music is everywhere in this collection. It's in your poetics, in the way that I mean, I've got some notes here. Even when you read these poems, there's almost like an eye rhythm, the way your eyes move across the lines. That is very rhythmical, very musical, and the way in which you sort of use tense, in which tenses might change in the same sentence. There's a dropping of articles sometimes in certain words. There's a bit of a fragmentary aesthetic that brings to my mind lyrics, you know, and brings to my mind like internal musicality. It's very much a poetics, like a capital P poetics. Like it's not lyrics, but there's a great sort of match between your poetics and also what you are writing about in many of these poems. I mean, there's a literal, I mean, there's a backdrop to a lot of these poems that is musical, you know, and maybe some of it is culturally specific. You know, I think of Ding Dong in particular, but also things that are more known to more people among South Africa. You know, Hot Sticks. Every time I play Burnout on my record player, my wife cries. I don't know. It just triggers something. The music is that trigger. Music is that emotional trigger, and I mean, what drives you to write about music? It's notoriously difficult to write about.
Well, I'd have to say that I listen to quite a bit of music, even just before I write. Well, I can't write to music in my ears because I think I get easily distracted, so I've stopped doing that. But yeah, I listen to lots and lots of music, different kinds of music as well. But I think for this particular chapbook, I just wanted to make the references more South African orientated as well. Just to keep a theme going. I think in the previous collection, I was a little bit more ambitious, going for American references, speaking about like rap music, The Far Side, Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that I'm listening to, but I think.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The Tribe Called Quest not entirely absent from the book because of the Tribe Called Quest inspired cover that we
Of course.
very subtly ripped off.
Nah, I think a lot of people have been coming to me with that, and I always say that it's a bit of that, and also the whole. I don't know if you've seen the cover for Theropate Fotile's The Prince of a Dangerous Place to Live.
Yeah.
Which is Pan African colors as well, but that's another another topic. But for the music side of it, I think it is down to me writing and reading out aloud. When I'm reading out aloud, I'm looking for that rhythm as well. I think the book is best enjoyed when read aloud as well, but you can read it normally as well. I think it allows itself, it's versatile. It allows that. But yeah, just a lot of music was being played at my house as well. In a black household, you can imagine the different kind of music. The other day, I stumbled upon my grandfather's old records,
Oh man.
but the record player was broken. So
Man, what sort of stuff was he into?
My grandfather.
Yeah.
There was BGs for very odd that I found BGs. I found some George Benson, Lou Rawls. There was a Marvin Gaye record there as well. Into his golden oldies, his soulful music.
Yeah. Oh man, George
I
Benson.
think I'm also into that as well. Yeah, George Benson is one of the greats.
There's also something here. So music as a backdrop, right? Because music is the backdrop to our lives. I mean, and it is for a lot of people. But in a way, I mean, it also helps. So it's sort of the background in this collection to moments of severe pain and great trauma and traumatic memory. And I wonder if you'd like to speak about that, because there's music is something that is both. I mean, music's like written literature or orality or even poetry itself, where there's something that is celebratory about it. It could be, there's lots of different functions, but the one thing about music is that it can always be in the background as something else is happening. And often for me, sometimes when I have painful episodes in my life, I can't listen to the music I was listening to during that time. It just brings it back. And there's almost that kind of like really searing pain sometimes in some of these poems where you're discussing, cassette, for example. I mean, that's just such a that was the poem that really convinced me that I take this collection on, because it just says so much about.
Well, I will say that once again, emphasize the point that music is a large sort of influence in my own household. And for me, I can relate to what you're saying, because on a Sunday morning, we'd be cooking breakfast and you have Anita Baker, Sweet Love playing in the background. And so when I hear that song now, I just remember a Sunday morning. So it's interesting that, you have these triggers that take you back. But with regard to cassette is based on a true story. about my uncle's death. My uncle was killed in '91. So that's a year after I was born.
Yeah.
And the story goes that okay, so my uncle was let's call him reckless to be nice. He was bit of a reckless man. Sort of fell into the mold of heavy drinker. Um, didn't really sort of have any goal that he set for himself, as opposed to my mother, who became a engineer in the ship. She works in the harbor. She made history as well. The first black woman engineer to pass her exams, but another my mother's a trailblazer in that light. And then my my mother's sisters became nurses, and he's the only one who didn't really have anything going at that time. So he was a heavy drinker. So my grandmother went to see a sangoma to sort of solve the problem, and turned out there might have been a bit of a curse going on there. So she had to go to the ancestral home in Melmoth. I don't know if you heard about the rural KZN Melmoth.
Whereabouts?
In Melmoth.
Oh, geez, yeah.
So she had to go to the ancestral home and collect some sand or to heal my uncle.
Yeah.
Which she did not get. She came back empty-handed, and moments not too long after that, he was stabbed over a cassette tape. So yeah, the poem was about how his murderer was never apprehended. My mother still points at him and says, "There's the man who killed my brother." So there's a lot of pain in the family over that incident. So I just want to.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that story. I mean, we didn't talk about it. I mean, it's a really heavy story, and I suppose it takes me on to my next point, which is writing about these traumatic things, not just like your own, but I mean, Bongani Mayosi and a few other people who feature in your poetry. It's something I think maybe as South Africans we keep on circling round back to, and that I mean most of us have episodes of extreme trauma in our lives, and it comes out in our art for those of us who are artists, and I often wonder what the exact thing we're trying to do here when we write about these things and share these things in public, which is really what we're doing. We're talking about these things in public. And yeah, I wonder what the purpose is. I mean, I have my own ideas about what I do with my work, but I wonder what that is for you. Or if it's just something that you do in your work because we write about our lives and those are things that are in our lives, and so obviously we write about them.
Well, I would say that Bongani Mayosi is a poem that I've linked to Free State. I think you can group them together, and it's about my experience in Bloemfontein.
Yeah.
But going back to art as sort of going over traumas, I'd say South Africa is one sort of country that I don't think has expressed or really vented all of its trauma.
Yeah.
And to a point where we get these, I don't know, releases in sort of vitriol, social media vitriol. Somebody says something, somebody loses their job. I think it's because of the way things happen so quickly post apartheid, and I think the real tensions were never really discussed. People were just meant to forgive and just move on. I think this There'd be a lot more healing if we really expressed what happened, or just for closure.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that happens that we almost don't have time to talk or write about everything, right?
No, of course, but we need to do the best we can to actually acknowledge that things did go down, and I think as artists, that's one of our main purposes for my subjective sort of idea of an artist,
Yeah.
and which is why I sort of parallel the life of Bangodi Mariosi to could have been me as I grew into lecturing and probably found myself in the same position. I think Black academics in South Africa have a steeper road, I feel, to prove themselves worthy of being in the space, in the academic space.
Yeah.
A lot of literature about that is coming out now. I know Malaika Azanya is launching a book about this very topic as we speak. So yeah, I think it's important that we touch on these. And as artists, I think I like to say we make the invisible visible.
Yeah.
So I think we need to come in. All right.
So I am cognizant of the fact that we are getting on a little bit here. So maybe if you'd like to read one or two more poems, and then we can ask Lindo to come and close this session.
All right.
So once you feel you'd like to read, then go first.
Okay, I think I'll read Twin. Yeah, one for the brother. I'll read Twin, and then I'll close with Rumblin, the title poem. All right. So Twin. Perhaps difference began from the parting of the lungs, crying from the depths for the first time. You left me behind in the womb, were the first to find a source of light. As the sun entered, slow, gradual, gentle, there I found you, brother, waiting for me on the other side of dawn. And then Rumbling. Souls, steps, the sands, footprints, heartbeat, the strength, the rumbling, blood boiling, running, flowing, veins, her chest gradually, inhales, exhales, knees, the ground, people of the south, bow heads down, palms together, clasping, clenching, may her bones hold long enough and back for the first time. And so now won't you tell me, Azanya, at the end of this all, will you live again? Thank you.
It's always great to hear you read. Before I hand over to Dwindo to close off this session, I just want to say that, again, this is the chapbook, Rumblin by Sihle Ntuli. It's available from all good bookstores in South Africa, but especially from the commune. And if you are outside of South Africa, you are able to get a copy of this from the African Books Collective. They will print it for you and send it to you wherever you are. And it's just as good as the South African version. Thank you again to Sihle, and thank you again to Lindo and to everybody from the commune and the forge. This has been really, really nice and really fun.
Hi, thanks so much, Nick and Sihle. It was honestly a pleasure to listen to your conversation. There's something very special about conversations between friends, about creative work that we need to make space for. And it's something that we are learning how to do again as part of this pandemic and at this time. as Nick said, the book is available at the Commune, so please feel free to come through and check it out. We should have it in the next week. But I really do want to thank you both so much for your time, and I really appreciate what I learned about Durban. This whole pandemic has meant that we're all kind of stuck at home. So I felt like I could take a little gentle stroll through Durban, through your memories, and kind of start imagining a very different space. Sihle, we are very grateful. And Nick, once again, thank you. And everyone who has been watching with us, thank you very much, and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.